So how many of you know where your friends that you had in school are today? Now, the biggest question that I'm trying to solve now is, where are all Lucas's friends? And I try to figure out the ideas behind a culture that is missing the people who are part of the friends that I went to school with. So as I try to imagine this, I ask you, where are your classmates at today? Trying to understand the idea that when you're going through the development of an infrastructure for a city and you're missing some creative technologists, we want to try to challenge you to try to find them. You see, I grew up in Columbus, Georgia, and you can see, by this picture, you can tell that that's the first time I've ever worn a suit and the last time. The basis was, when I grew up, all of my classmates, I grew up on Legos and hyped up on Coca-Cola and video games, very typical young technologist attitude. And as I began to live, I started to understand that I had a gravitational pull for other technologists. And in that pull, I started to say, well, that's great. So high school came, I made friends with people who played video games, drank Coca-Cola, and did the similar things. And then as I started to graduate, I got to college, and I started to look for these same people, and I found them. I graduated college, and then something happened. They all moved away. One by one, my friends, the people who had shared the same passion for technology, the same creative approach to create something that was useful, whether it be software or art, and we'll examine that. The idea is that I found myself in a big problem. So imagine this for 1 second. You have a city that is missing 2 decades of creative technologists. The idea of this is so profound that there might even be this feeling that there is a missing hole in your community right now. This would feel very similar to someone on your city council that has a technology degree. In Columbus, Georgia, we have this issue where we're trying to find these people who are wanting to be a part of our infrastructure, who are wanting to help us innovate our tech sector, who are wanting to help us grow when we need technology the most. And this is a big problem because there's a gap. So we're trying to find these creative technologists and create something for them. So in that opportunity, I wanted to mention what a creative technologist is. This isn't a new term. Matter of fact, we think of this all the time. It's just we haven't used it as a form of noun for a sort of subclass, sort of this new creature that's a part of our culture. And the idea as a creative technologist is anyone who uses technology to wield artistic work. And the idea behind this is that you could think of this as a graphic designer. This is a web developer. This is somebody who puts their passion into something that has an output using technology. This is a great idea. Seth Godin says, I love Seth, he always talks about art, and I reference this a lot. Art is not only just the things that we draw on pieces of canvases and put in nice museums, but it is a gift. And creative technologists have this opportunity to give a gift back to the community. And so when we do this, we want to know that it matters, but also that it has an intention. So round it up. So what are we all going to do about it? Well, it was a great thing because back in December of 2013, I took a trip across the state of Georgia and landed in Augusta. I had heard of this great thing going on called Hackathons in the clubhouse, and I ventured in and I said, wow, this is amazing. So you can imagine me walking into the clubhouse and suddenly kind of gravitating to everybody. My conversations were very acutely around technology. I had found my friends. I had found the people that I went to school with. Outside of what was happening in Columbus at this time, there was a lot of people who were going to the bigger cities, and the technologists of our time were just kind of evaporating. And that brain drain was very important to recognize. So when I got to see that this culmination of culture happening in Augusta, I was very overwhelmed. So much so that I decided to come back to Columbus and do a hackathon myself. So in the terms of hackathons, we have this really systematic approach to what is a hackathon. But for us, basically for me, what it was is the idea that I could get people who were like me to come out of the woodworks. You see, we didn't have a typical social structure. I mean, if you're playing video games, the idea is not to go on a movie night on Friday. It's actually sitting, playing video games, communicating with digital conversations across the globe. And so this was a very intense structure. So we did it. So we finally did it. And in February, we had our first hackathon. I'm not kidding you, it kind of looks like a dismal wedding. We didn't have the outcome we had initially thought we were going to do. And of course, our event coordinator brought us wedding tables, okay? So the idea, though, is by March, we had introduced 50 new creative technologists into a single group. And this was a new thing for Columbus, Georgia. And as we got closer and closer to trying to develop relationships and connections in between all of these people, we started to realize that there was a conversation that needed to be had. So when we started to culminate and started to produce all this great output, we really looked at all the results. We had these creative technologists sitting in a room, collaborating, talking about ideas on how we're going to change the way we treat things. And one of the focuses was, how are we going to create something that helps us with our community? And how is that going to affect the way that we're going to try to develop relationships to our young creative technologists so I can have more friends? Very greedy, right? So in May 2014, we participated with a national hackathon series. And something very original happened. And I tried to explain this to certain people, that I was dumbfounded by a phone call that I had that was after this. And they saw a report that I did about the socioeconomic impact that we had with our hackathon. And next thing I knew, I was on the phone. During this conversation, they're saying to me, "Lucas, you did a great hackathon, but what about that interview you did?" And I said, "The interview, yes, the interview was important." I said, "How are we supposed to know what our community needs if we do not ask them?" It was common sense to me. The idea that they said, "Well, not everybody did that, Lucas. I mean, what was the inspiration?" I said, "Well, we just thought it'd be a great idea to go down there and ask the city what the problems were." And he says, "Well, that's very unique." And I said, "So wait a minute, so you're telling me that over the 600 hackathons that participated in this national organization didn't take a little bit of time to go ask these organizations if they needed help?" And they didn't. I was like, wow. And I said, what audacity do these West Coast hackers have to not ask these questions and to participate in the community in this? And so we knew we had something. We knew there was something different. The results from the interview are basically the idea that we're communicating to our local government. We're communicating to our local organizations. And through this conversation, we're developing relationships. So one of the reasons that we tried to develop an idea about this connection is because all the people who were leaving, the brain drain, this collective young talent pool that was no longer there, that gap of 20 years of no creative technologists looking at trying to run our city or to help, we started to say, well, this interview allowed us to create that connection early on. And we found something out very unique. Once these connections began to form, we started to realize that there was nothing that was going to stop us and stand in our way. We basically had every organization in Columbus saying, "We need help." And then I met this guy. Now, Gabriel Lundin is the deputy director of our Chattahoochee Valley Library system at our main public library. He attended one of our hackathons and clearly stated, he says, "I love what you guys are doing. We're doing something similar. Come check this out." And I did, and I said, "This is great. You're at the right place." Another connection is born. And I said, "Hey, how can we help you?" And he says, "Hack the library." Very clearly, hack the library. I did a little research. It's like there's nobody hacking libraries. And whether it's a negative connotation to do something like this is one thing. Because as we accumulate the organizations, we're literally hacking the organizations. So you could see that there is an apparent need. And of course, the first time we got a chance to sit down, we had one of the biggest interviews ever. We had all the executive directors of our 7 libraries attend this meeting. And it looked like we were giving away free cookies. They were very interested at why we were taking time out of our day to come and solve some big time issues that they had when trying to communicate, their needs to the general public. A library is this people's university, right? It's the bastion of hope for people who can't go to college in some cases. And what we found out that there were some big problems. There were some people that were trying to create all this information. We had people driving up to use the Wi-Fi. There was no connection, and if I could examine the way I thought I felt about it, was our public library was like an oasis, and it was feeding data instead of water to the public. Very interesting concepts. So when we sat down with the interview, we derived 29 challenges, and there they are. You can't see them, but if you want more information, I can show you. It's just a big piece of paper. We sat down, we basically took over our public library for 48 hours. Not only that, we got to engage with other cities. We had people from Augusta, we had people from LaGrange, we had people from Macon come and visit and participate. And this culmination of multiple hacker groups from across the state of Georgia, centering their focus on trying to help a Columbus, Georgia-based organization, was just an extreme amount of joy coming out of that. So, of course, the things that we created, like Lucas, what happened? What was Hack the Library about? It was about trying to connect our public to the library in different ways. There had a need of, I always said the biggest interesting part about the public library was that the one we just built is a big, huge building, and they laid the last brick a year before the iPad came out. So you imagine if they would have waited 2 years on the construction, how this library would have looked. So they have these intrinsic problems with technology. But we decided that we're going to solve these, and out of that came 7, one of them being this 3D model behind me, where it actually creates a virtual environment where we could paint the walls with exactly what's in the library. So not only that, but for us it was about making a connection to the community. We had over 100 people in attendance, plus a group of Girl Scouts. Now this is an amazing story because they actually won the hackathon. And you say, well, how did they win the hackathon, Lucas? I said, well, not only does it make a great story, but they did something amazing. This is them. Since we were shutting down the library for 48 hours, we actually had a tour, a midnight tour with flashlights. And that's something very unique, a connection, a story for them to tell in the future. You can see here, they're very excited about winning that. The ideas that we're trying to do and pull this together is that we're looking to try to communicate and collaborate with organizations today and trying to find out how we can elaborate and create long-lasting relationships to effectively counterbalance the brain drain in our own communities. That's it. Thank you.